Alrighty, guys. So moving on to tonight's topic around cardio. Now, obviously, if you're working with me, you don't have to worry about figuring all this stuff out, but I think it's always super helpful to understand the role of cardio, but also which option is best for you when it comes to the differences in forms of cardio, which we're going to touch on anyway. But the first and most important thing to understand is that when it comes to fat loss or changing your body composition, cardio does not equal fat loss. Right, really important to understand that cardio does not equal fat loss. I remember years ago, I was doing this half marathon, and I just come off the back of competing. So I'd done no cardio whatsoever for a long period of time while I was doing the competing. It was just all strength training, which is the first example as to how you don't need to do cardio to lose fat. And I did this half marathon. So my cardio went from 0 to a couple hours a week, or 2, 3 hours a week. I think didn't really train enough for it, to be honest, but I still did a decent amount leading into the run. So I intentionally made sure that I was eating in a calorie surplus while I was doing this training for the half marathon. So the reason I did that is to show people that if you are eating too many calories, you can do all the cardio in the world, but you will not lose fat. So in that period of time, I actually gained a kilo or two, which definitely didn't help for the run. But what it did show is that you can do endless amounts of cardio, but if your nutrition is not aligned, you will not see results. So, as you guys should know by now, for fat loss or changing your body composition, it comes down to your energy balance. And that's created through training, yes, but also and mainly our nutritional intake. So, to lose fat, we need to be in a negative energy balance, which is created through a calorie deficit. Pretty straightforward. So, in saying that, we can get in the best shape that we've ever been in doing absolutely zero cardio if we want to. Now, from a health perspective, I think it is important to have some form of cardio throughout your week. Now, that does not necessarily have to be a designated cardio session that I've given you, like a run or a ride or a swim or a HIIT session or whatever. That could just be walking. That could be the intensity that you're training at to work on your cardiovascular health, because obviously that is super important. And the better our cardio system is, the better we recover. So the faster we recover between sets, the better we recover between training sessions. And obviously our blood flow and just our general health and well-being is going to be better with better cardiovascular health. But when it comes to body composition, as I just said, it's not necessary for us to be doing cardio to lose fat. We can do it just from lifting weights in the gym, or we could do it from just walking every day if we wanted to. We could do it from doing Pilates. We can achieve fat loss doing any form of training. So what that should help you understand as well is that there's no such thing as a fat loss workout. So a HIIT session as is a group training session or whatever that's targeted towards burning heavy calories is not automatically going to make you lose fat if your calorie intake for the week is still in a surplus or at maintenance. Now, same with the gym. Now, the beauty of strength training, though, is that we are aiming to build lean muscle tissue. And the more lean muscle tissue we have, the more energy and calories that our body has to expend when we're training and when we're at rest, meaning that we can lose fat at a higher calorie intake. So that's why it's so important to have the muscle mass there in the first place. Not to mention that when we lose the body fat, if there's no muscle mass there, our shape's going to look like shit. You're not going to like definition, tone, ripped, all these different buzzwords. It's created through building the muscle first and then losing the fat to reveal the shape, which is what creates that illusion of tone or definition. So strength training is always super important. Some people really enjoy cardio, some people don't. Now, whenever I start someone's fat loss phase, I typically start with very minimal to none in terms of cardio. And the training side of things can also be quite low too. Calories can be quite high, meaning we're just slightly in a calorie deficit. And the reason for that is when we hit a plateau, which is inevitable, if we start with heaps of cardio, not many calories, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's not really many places to go there, which is a shit position to be in. But if we start with training low and calories quite high, only in a small deficit, when we hit that plateau, there's so many things we can do. We can reduce calories, we can increase energy output. That might come from more gym work, an extra day in the gym, or it can come from cardio. So now I want to quickly touch on the different forms of cardio and how you can choose which one is kind of best suited to you. The first and most important thing realistically is enjoyment. So if you absolutely fucking hate walking on a treadmill or riding a bike or swimming or jogging, then quite clearly that style of cardio is not going to be best suited to you, because you're not going to want to do it, firstly. Secondly, you're probably not going to stick to it. And thirdly, we should be enjoying our training when we do train. And it should be something that we look forward to. So over time, we can progress much more efficiently. If it's something you don't like, I'm sure every single one of you at some point in time has had a training program or cardio or whatever where you really just don't enjoy the sessions, and you spend your whole day thinking about how fucking badly you don't want to do it. That's never going to last over a long period of time. So enjoyment is the first and most important thing. So like I personally, when I'm not trying to lose fat, probably do more cardio, to be honest, because when I'm eating more calories and have more energy and all the rest of it, I typically enjoy running. So I'll run probably more when I'm not trying to lose fat than when I am trying to lose it, because I just enjoy it. So some people really do enjoy cardio styles of training, and that's completely fine. And that should be part of your program if that's you. We have kind of two different options realistically when it comes to what style of cardio we're going to use. And they both have their benefits. They both have their pros and cons. So the first one we'll talk about is steady state cardio. So low intensity, longer duration cardio. So think of going for a jog, going for a ride or a swim, walking on an incline on a treadmill, using the cross trainer, which is the worst piece of equipment in the gym ever. But something that's going to last for a prolonged period of time. So at least 20 minutes, like up to an hour. Even going for long walks, it would be classified as long, slow, low intensity, steady state cardio. So when we do this form of cardio, there's a few benefits, right? The first one is that it doesn't require a great deal of effort. Okay, so sometimes that can be much better, being able to switch off, good for the headspace, all the rest of it. It's typically a lot less taxing on the body. Obviously, running and stuff is not that great for the body, to be honest, but it's not as taxing on the body, and particularly the central nervous system. The next thing is that we are going to burn more calories in that period of time than what we would when we do HIIT, which I'll touch on in a second. That's another benefit. What else have we got? I mean, it doesn't require as much motivation sometimes, unless your focus is the time. When, for myself, I would prefer to do something short and high intensity instead of knowing that I'm about to spend 45 minutes to an hour doing something quite boring. But they're kind of the benefits. And because it's a lower intensity, we can build our actual aerobic capacity, our aerobic base up quite well. I'll go through the positives of the HIIT, and I'll kind of talk about the negatives of both as well, or the cons. There's not really negatives, but there are things you need to take into consideration. So with high intensity interval training, the very first thing that we need to talk about is that high intensity interval training, the purpose of that is to put us into an oxygen debt. Basically, we have this thing called EPOC. I think it stands for exercise post oxygen consumption. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. What that means is that I'm sure every single one of you, when you've done a HIIT session, so you're doing really high intensity cardio, you get to the point where sometimes your ears can block, you start yawning. The reason for that is because your body is not able to provide enough oxygen to the working muscles. So we go into this oxygen debt. All right, so we're expending a lot of energy in a short period of time, but we're also working harder than our aerobic system can keep up with. And that's when we push into anaerobic system, right? And lactate threshold stuff as well. But when we're in this energy or this oxygen debt, it's because the intensity is so high. So typically when you finish a HIIT session, you're gonna feel fatigue for a longer period of time, and you're going to be gassed a lot more than what you would be when you do the lower intensity. So for it to be a HIIT session, it's important to understand that it needs to be very short periods of work at maximum intensity. So doing some intervals on the treadmill, intervals on a bike or whatever it may be, is not HIIT. It's interval training, but it's not HIIT. HIIT is when we are going at 100% intensity for between 5 to 20 seconds, typically. That's usually the sweet spot with the amount of time or the duration we can be at that high intensity for. If you think of someone like Usain Bolt, who is the fastest man on the planet, or was, he can't go at a maximum intensity for longer than like 20 seconds, right? The 200-meter sprint, I think, is like 19 seconds. And that was kind of like the upper end of the distance that he could do at that intensity. So how the fuck do we think that we're going to be able to do any more than that, to be honest? To get the benefits from HIIT, it has to be maximum intensity. So I see people in the gym in their workouts all the time doing what they classify as HIIT, but it's realistically just interval training. You know, you're running for a little bit, then you stop for a bit, and you go again. But to get the benefits of this oxygen debt, at the end of every single effort, we should feel like we did when we were in school and we had to do the 100-meter sprint. You're absolutely wrecked for the next few minutes, and you've only run for 10 to 15 seconds or however long it takes you to run 100 meters. So the effort has to be significantly high. It has to be uncomfortably high when we're doing HIIT. Now, the duration is much shorter. So the pros of HIIT, it requires a much shorter period of time. So typically HIIT sessions would be anywhere from like 4 minutes up to, I'd probably say a maximum of 15 to 20 minutes if you're doing it properly. The duration, as I said, 5 to 20 seconds typically. The rest period should be long enough to recover enough to be able to go again at a high intensity. So if we're working for, let's say 5 to 20 seconds, our rest periods might be from 45 seconds all the way up to like 2 minutes sometimes. Now, the purpose of that is to make sure that the intensity of the next set or the next effort can be high enough to get the benefits. So the pros, as I said, much shorter period of time for us to do it. So that's why I'm a big fan of HIIT, and that's why I use it a lot with clients, is because at the end of their session, I don't want to then say, all right, you've trained for the last 45, 60 minutes. Now you're going to spend another 45, 60 minutes doing cardio. That's just shit. So instead, it might be 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, so it's much easier to get motivated to do that, even though the effort is a lot harder. The next benefit is that typically, if we are doing some form of HIIT, a lot of the time it's with resistance. Okay, it doesn't have to be, but it could be just sprints, it could be swimming sprints or whatever it is. So there's no real resistance there. But my favorite form typically of HIIT is when we're doing something like a sled push or an assault bike, even a rower or ball slams. You can use things like kettlebell swings, box jumps, whatever. And when we are using some form of resistance with the cardio, we're also getting the benefit of muscle tissue breakdown, similar to when we do strength training. So short period of time, it's a little bit easier to get motivated for. We're getting best of both worlds. And then one of the most important pros or benefits of HIIT is that after we have finished the session, our body continues to expend energy for a longer period of time. Now, there's a bunch of different research that shows that I think it's up to around 24 hours or something like that. That's obviously going to depend on how hard you've actually pushed yourself. But our body stays in this anabolic state where we're continuing to expend energy, right? And that's where a lot of this benefit comes from when it comes to HIIT, and that's why it's so popular. So we've got the pros for both. Now the cons for both here, and this is going to allow you to choose which one suits you best. The cons of, or the negatives, I guess you could say, of the low intensity, slow, steady state cardio is that once you finish your session, your body is pretty much done expending energy, right? Which is not a bad thing, but that's it. The next con is that it requires a lot more time. So it takes a lot longer to complete. After that, I mean, what other negatives are there really of it? There's not too many. I think it's just the fact that it's just the longer duration. Your body stops expending energy as soon as you're done, and you're not getting the benefits of like the muscle tissue breakdown like you can with HIIT, particularly resistance-based HIIT. The negatives or the cons of HIIT is that it is very taxing on the body. So if you're doing strength training 4 or 5 times a week and you're doing a HIIT session or a couple of HIIT sessions as well, then your body is going to take longer to recover. So if you start to find that you've been doing HIIT at the end of an upper body day and you might have done like sled pushes or even battle ropes, whatever it may be, and the next day you go in and do your strength training session and you're so sore and not recovered from HIIT that it actually starts to have a negative effect on your ability to progress at the overload, then that's a bit of an issue. Okay, so it becomes an issue then, whereas the slower, low intensity stuff is a lot easier to recover from, obviously. So that's a negative. The other thing is that obviously it requires a fuckload more effort. So unless you're actually having a decent crack, you're not going to get the benefits. So most people just don't train hard enough when they do HIIT. It should be very uncomfortable, and that's why you can't do as much of it. Okay, so that's a negative as well. And yeah, it's just taxing on the body. It's obviously much more taxing on the body than the lower intensity work, but that's kind of like the pros and cons of both. And that's why I say to people, it's kind of up to you which one you prefer. So if you're someone that feels like it's eating into your recovery from strength training and it's having a negative effect, then obviously the longer low intensity option might be better for you. Also, if you're someone who just enjoys kind of switching off and going for a jog or whatever it may be, then that's going to be a better option for you. But if you're someone who's time poor, someone who is super busy and doesn't have a great deal of time to be in the gym, HIIT is perfect. It's a game changer. It's also great for when you're trying to minimize the amount of time that you have to be actually training, but also maximize the reward for effort. As I said, HIIT, prolonged period of energy output, low intensity, can be prolonged like while you're doing it, but as soon as you're done, your body kind of stops. All right, so hopefully that helps you guys understand that a little better, and also just gain that understanding of what role cardio plays. It can be fantastic, but just keep in mind that it has to be aligned with your nutritional intake. Otherwise, it's not going to have the effect that you think it's going to have. And there's always a massive importance on the strength and resistance work, because our goal is to look lean and muscular realistically, right? We don't all want to look like bodybuilders or anything, but even if you're just trying to get lean, if there's no muscle underneath, there's no shape. So you're going to be disappointed with how you look. So cardio can be a great tool. HIIT and low intensity, long steady state. What am I trying to say? Like the lower intensity, longer duration cardio or HIIT, two options there. You have a mix of both. You can choose one or the other. But hopefully that helps you guys understand a little further around how all that works.